All right, so we've got another story here ready for a deep dive. And
Yeah.
this one has some serious cliche action going on.
Mm.
But, there might be like a hidden depth to it, maybe?
Yeah, I'm intrigued.
Yeah. So we've got two characters. Vancouver, Vancouver,
Okay.
yes, named after their hometowns. Struck in an airport thanks to a snowstorm.
Oh my gosh.
He's all business. Never takes a break. Practically sleeps with his laptop.
Ugh.
Well, let's just say she's more into finding the perfect airport coffee than
Oh.
checking her stock portfolio.
Okay, so we've got like the classic kind of forced proximity
Yes.
trope happening here. We've got the, kind of the uptight businessman versus the free spirit.
It's like the writer grabbed a bingo card of romance tropes and just...
Literally down the list.
Right. But, even though it is so predictable,
Yeah.
there's something about this setup that keeps us coming back for more.
Okay, I'll bite.
Okay.
Why do we keep falling for these stories?
Is it some kind of collective yearning for a simpler life
Yeah.
where we can just ditch our responsibilities
You're right.
and run off with a free-spirited coffee connoisseur?
I mean, maybe it is the fantasy of escape.
Yeah.
The idea that someone out there can shake us out of our routines and
Yeah.
show us a different way of being. There's something appealing about the city boy meets free spirit dynamic, even if it's been done a million times before.
Right, the whole opposites attract thing.
Yeah.
Like, somehow her whimsical obsession with finding the best cup of joe will magically melt his icy corporate exterior.
Yeah, but in this story, it's not just their personalities that are different.
Right.
The story really hammers it home with all these little details. Like, Pierre's got this notebook she calls her manifesto,
Oh, yeah.
where she's always jotting down her thoughts and dreams.
Oh, that's so cliche.
I know, right?
But
But he caught my attention too. It suggests a depth to her character
right.
that goes beyond the stereotypical free spirit trope. It makes you wonder what kind of dreams she's filling those pages with.
Oh, I don't know. Maybe she's writing about opening a coffee shop that also sells homemade pies
Okay.
and offers free therapy sessions for stressed out travelers.
All right, well, maybe not that exactly.
Yeah.
But it does create a contrast with Vancouver, who seems to be living entirely in his laptop,
Right.
constantly checking emails and stressing about deadlines. It's like they're living in two completely different worlds,
Yeah.
even though they're stuck in the same airport terminal.
And, of course, that's where the forced proximity trope comes in. They're literally trapped together with nothing to do but stare at the departure board
Right.
and annoy each other.
Which, let's be honest, is a pretty flimsy premise for a story.
Oh, yeah.
But it does create this artificial pressure cooker for character development.
Sure, okay.
It's like the writer saying, okay, you two, you're going to be stuck here until you learn something about yourselves.
Yeah.
Or at least until the snowplows clear the runway.
And in this case, what they learn is how to build a fort out of airport chairs.
Oh my God.
I'm not kidding. There's actually a scene where they drag these chairs together
Yeah.
and create this little hideaway in the deserted terminal.
That's interesting. I suppose it's meant to symbolize like their growing bond, their willingness to create a shared space in this chaotic environment.
Right.
Or maybe the writer just thought it would be a cute visual.
Oh, it's definitely cute. Almost sickeningly so.
Uh,
But even in their little chair fort,
okay.
the story keeps hitting us over the head with how different they are.
Mm-hmm.
Pierre's making sarcastic comments about the people around them,
Mm-hmm.
while Vancouver is glued to his phone having a full-blown meltdown about a missed conference call.
It's like they're speaking different languages, both literally and figuratively.
Right.
He's all about efficiency and productivity, while she's more about embracing the moment and
Right.
finding the joy in the mundane.
If this was a drinking game, we'd have to take a shot every time the story mentions how uptight Vancouver is or how free-spirited Pierre is.
I think we'd be pretty tipsy by this point.
Oh, for sure.
But to be fair to the writer, they are trying to establish these contrasting personalities,
Right.
even if they're relying on some pretty well-worn tropes to do it.
Right, because the whole point is to see if these two can somehow bridge the gap between their worlds.
Yeah,
Right? Can her quirky charm thaw his frozen heart?
right.
Will his corporate savvy inspire her to finally write that manifesto?
Or maybe they'll just drive each other crazy
Right.
and end up on separate flights, vowing to never speak to anyone named after a Canadian city ever again.
The suspense is killing me.
I know.
Okay, well, before we find out if they achieve world peace through the power of airport coffee,
Okay.
let's take a closer look at what's really going on beneath the surface of these cliched characters.
Okay.
Because even in the most predictable story,
Huh.
there might be some hidden depths waiting to be explored.
That's what we're here for. Let's see if we can find something interesting in this pile of tropes. I'm almost afraid to see what happens next, but let's dive in.
Okay, so we left our intrepid travelers huddled in their makeshift chair fort, surrounded by discarded coffee cups.
Yeah.
And probably smelling faintly of desperation.
Yeah.
Are we finally going to get to the moment where they realize they're meant to be?
Right.
Or are we just going to be stuck with more witty banter and descriptions of terrible airport food?
Well, the story tries to throw us off the scent a little bit
Okay.
by making it seem like they're actually connecting on a deeper level. They start sharing stories about their pasts, their dreams, their fears. You know, all that deep stuff that usually happens over candlelight and a shared bottle of wine.
Yeah.
Not lukewarm vending machine coffee.
Right, like that scene where Vancouver confesses that he's starting to question his whole workaholic lifestyle.
Yeah.
I mean, who wouldn't have an existential crisis after being trapped in an airport for 24 hours with nothing but stale pretzels and bad Wi-Fi?
It's almost as if the writer realized that constantly describing Vancouver as uptight
Right.
wasn't enough to create a believable character. They needed to give him some inner turmoil, some vulnerability, to make us believe that he might actually be capable of change.
But let's be real. The only reason he's opening up is because he's bored out of his mind.
Okay.
And Pierre is the only person within a 10-mile radius who isn't snoring on a terminal bench.
That's a cynical take.
Yeah.
But there might be some truth to it. You know, forced proximity can have that effect.
Right.
Stripping away those carefully constructed facades and forcing people to confront their own insecurities or, you know, just making them desperate for any kind of human interaction.
Right. And speaking of facades, let's talk about Pierre. She's still rocking the free-spirited, quirky girl persona.
Yeah.
But the story starts dropping hints that there might be more to her than meets the eye. Like, remember her manifesto notebook?
Oh, yeah.
Well, there's a scene where she accidentally leaves it behind, and Vancouver finds this list she's made titled What I Want Someday.
The classic accidentally left behind plot device.
Oh, come on.
It's like the writer's way of saying, hey, pay attention to this.
Yeah.
It's important. But in this case, it does offer a glimpse into Pierre's inner world beyond the surface level quirkiness.
Oh, yeah. It's full of really profound stuff like a house with a big kitchen, a dog named Charlie, and a shop filled with books and pie. Groundbreaking. Right.
Right. So maybe it's not exactly a manifesto for revolutionizing society,
Right.
but it does suggest that Pierre has aspirations.
Yeah.
Beyond just finding the perfect latte, it hints at a desire for stability connection.
Right.
A place to call her own.
Right, because even free spirits need to pay rent and occasionally do laundry.
Exactly.
But the story doesn't dwell on these practicalities. Instead, it keeps emphasizing the contrast between her whimsical dreams and Vancouver's rigid adherence to his corporate schedule.
It's as if the writer is setting up this dichotomy between the practical and the imaginative, the structured and the spontaneous. But the question is, does the story actually explore this tension in a meaningful way? Or is it just using it as a source of superficial conflict?
Well, there's a scene where they're watching the flight board, and Pierre compares the planes to fireflies. It's supposed to be this moment of shared wonder.
Oh, God.
But honestly, it just made me roll my eyes.
The obligatory moment of shared awe. It's a staple of the romantic comedy genre.
I know.
Designed to show that even the most cynical character can be moved by something beautiful. But in this case, it feels forced. Like the writer is trying too hard to create a spark between these two.
It's like they're checking boxes on a romantic comedy checklist. Forced proximity check.
Yeah.
Quirky banter check.
Yeah.
Moment of shared awe check.
Now, where's that airport mistletoe?
Don't give the writer any ideas.
I know, right?
But you're right, there's a lack of spontaneity.
Yeah.
A sense that the story is following a formula.
Totally.
Rather than letting the characters organically connect.
And that's where the story starts to lose me. I mean, I'm all for a good slow burn.
Yeah.
But this is more like a slow simmer where there are moments where you think they might actually get somewhere, but then the story pulls them apart again.
Yeah.
It's like watching two magnets repel each other,
Yes.
no matter how close you try to force them together.
It's a common pitfall of the will they or won't they dynamic.
Right.
You know, the writer needs to create enough tension, enough believable obstacles to keep the audience invested. But if they keep pulling the characters apart without justifying it, it just becomes frustrating.
Exactly. And in this case, the obstacles feel pretty contrived.
Like what?
Like, there's a whole scene where Pierre disappears to entertain a group of kids with card tricks.
Oh, barely.
While Vancouver is stuck on the phone with his boss. I mean, come on, who just wanders off in the middle of a conversation.
Right.
To perform magic tricks for strangers.
It's as if the writer is trying to highlight their differences.
Yeah.
But they're doing it in a way that feels more like caricature than character development.
Right. And it all leads to this unsatisfying feeling of, so what?
I'm halfway through the story, and I'm still not sure if these two have any real chemistry.
Right.
Or if they're just killing time until their flights get rescheduled.
It's a valid concern. The story needs to offer us something more.
Right.
Some reason to care about these characters and their journey.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just a collection of tropes and misconnections.
So the question is, does the ending deliver the goods?
Right.
Does it justify all this buildup, all this forced proximity and witty banter?
Yeah.
Or does it leave us feeling like we just wasted a perfectly good airport layover?
Right.
Reading a story that ultimately went nowhere?
Well, that's what we're about to find out. Let's dive into the final act and see if the writer manages to salvage this story from the depths of cliché mediocrity.
Okay, so the snow has finally stopped falling. The flights are maybe back on schedule. And our two characters are about to head back to their real lives.
Yeah.
But before they can escape the purgatory of the Denver airport,
right,
there's one final twist.
Uh-oh.
Vancouver, Mr. I Live and Breathe Spreadsheets, actually gets off the plane.
What?
Yes. Just when you thought this story couldn't get any more predictable,
right,
it throws us this curveball. He hears his flight number called Hora. He gets up, walks down the jet bridge, and then he turns around and walks back into the terminal.
So he gets off the plane?
He gets off the plane.
But then gets back on?
Or no, he gets off the plane.
And comes back into the airport?
He gets off the plane and walks back into the terminal.
Wow.
It's like he suddenly realized that going back to his perfectly organized life would mean going back to that existential crisis we talked about earlier. Or maybe he just forgot to buy one of those overpriced airport neck pillows.
Well, the story tries to frame it as a moment of self-discovery, you know, a realization that he needs more than just his work to feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
But honestly, it feels a bit rushed. Like the writer was trying to cram a whole character arc into the last 5 minutes.
Right. Because after spending the entire story telling us how much Vancouver values efficiency and predictability, suddenly he's making impulsive decisions and throwing caution to the wind.
Yeah.
It's not exactly believable, is it?
It does raise the question of whether his change of heart is genuine or just a knee-jerk reaction to the monotony of his life. Is he truly ready to embrace a different way of being?
Right.
Or is this just a temporary escape before he inevitably gets sucked back into the corporate vortex?
And the story doesn't really give us an answer, does it?
Ugh.
It just ends with him searching for flights to Pierre, South Dakota.
Oh, no.
We don't know if he actually goes there.
Right.
If he even knows what he's going to do once he gets there. Like the writer just threw up their hands and said, okay, I'm tired of writing this story.
Literally.
You figure out the ending.
It's a rather abrupt ending, leaving us with a lot of unanswered questions.
Yeah. Like, does he actually reconnect with Pierre? Does he just end up wandering around Pierre, South Dakota, wondering what he's doing with his life? Does he even like coffee?
Right. Maybe he shows up at Pierre's doorstep, expecting her to welcome him with open arms and a freshly brewed cup of joe.
Right.
Only to find out she's moved on with a rugged, flannel-wearing lumberjack who also happens to be a world-renowned barista champion.
Exactly. The story doesn't offer much closure. It's like the writer was afraid to commit to a definitive ending.
Yeah.
Leaving us with this vague sense of possibility, but also a lot of frustration. So what's the takeaway here? Is this a story about the transformative power of chance encounters? Or is it just a cautionary tale about the dangers of reading cliché-ridden airport novels?
Perhaps it's a bit of both. You know, it's a reminder that even the most mundane experiences can have unexpected consequences.
Right.
That even the most predictable stories can throw us a curveball.
Yeah.
But it's also a reminder that sometimes those curveballs are just cheap tricks designed to create a false sense of excitement before ultimately leaving us feeling unfulfilled.
So in other words, this story's a bit like airport coffee. Overpriced, underwhelming, and ultimately forgettable.
I wouldn't go that far. It does have its moments.
Okay.
You know, it's glimmers of insight into the human condition. Yeah. But it also suffers from a lack of depth, a reliance on tropes.
Yeah.
And an ending that leaves us feeling more confused than enlightened.
Well, I guess that's what we get for trying to find meaning in an airport novel. Next time I'm sticking to the crossword puzzles and overpriced snacks.
I'll raise a lukewarm cup of coffee to that. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the sometimes frustrating, sometimes fascinating world of storytelling. And remember, dear listener, if you ever find yourself stranded in an airport with nothing to read, maybe just embrace the boredom. Sometimes the most profound moments come when we allow ourselves to simply be, without the distraction of predictable plots and overused tropes.
Or maybe just take a nap. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time for another adventure in the world of ideas. Hopefully it'll be a bit more stimulating than this one.